Hello and welcome along to the Property Academy podcast by Opus Partners. I'm your host, Steve McKnight.
And I'm Andrew Nicol.
And today on the show, we're talking about unethical and dodgy sales tactics. And we are seeing a bit of this from both property investment companies and sometimes even real estate agents too. And so we're going to go through the 5 dodgy and unethical sales tactics that you need to be aware of so you can actually avoid them. Now, Andrew, one of them really gets up your goat, doesn't it? It's called we call it the GST dance.
Yeah,
What's that?
Yeah, so there are a lot of times where developers or companies like us, and actually there's one company like us, it's not us, company like us, who recommend investment properties to investors. I understand at the moment they're doing this thing, which, I mean, it is actually fraud. There are plenty of times where you can have GST structures with property investment. And there's genuine reasons that you do that, particularly in commercial properties or Airbnbs, potentially sometimes. Not necessarily what I'd recommend, but some people might do it that way. But what I understand has been happening is people have been misleading banks. So what they're doing is they'll go sign up for a property and we'll call it 800 grand. So buy a property for 800 grand. And then what they're doing is they're taking that contract to the bank and saying, right, I'm buying a property for 800,000. I need $800,000 worth of lending. Then they go back to the developer and they say, actually, we're going to buy this property GST exclusive. So we're going to buy it 0 rated, which means I'm going to buy it excluding GST and a GST registered entity, and that means I get a discount on the purchase price.
Well, it's not a discount. It means that you don't have to pay the tax. Now, in that example, Andrew, you said an $800,000 property. Now, if you bought it GST exclusive, that means you're only going to pay $695 grand. Save yourself, in inverted commas, $105,000. Now, okay, so they're going to go to the bank and they're saying, oh yeah, I need 800 grand. So they get 800 grand from the bank and then they only pay 695K of that to the developer and they've got 105 grand left over. So what are they doing with that?
So I think that money is probably being used to manage cash flow over the next wee while, because cash flow is the hard part about buying a property today, right? If you can get a really good deal, great time to buy a property, but cash flow is going to suck over the next few years. So I think that's being used to bridge that cash flow gap.
So you're telling me they're borrowing money to effectively pay for borrowed money?
Yeah.
Okay. And why is this fraudulent? Why is this illegal and totally unethical?
Okay, so you can't use 2 contracts. So if you know that you're going to buy GST exclusive, you need to provide the correct contract to the bank. Now, it's my understanding.
Oh, come on, Andrew. We all know that you hired a private investigator to go in. It's not just your understanding. You've got evidence of this.
Yeah, I checked it out. And so as a result, we know that they're actually providing one contract to a lender, and then one contract to their solicitor, and they're settling on the solicitor's one, but they're telling the banks that, hey, this contract is the one we're using, this is completely genuine.
And of course, the bank usually would only lend up to 80% against a property. And so if they're saying, well, lend me 80% of 800 grand, these people are taking out 640 grand worth of debt against their property. Their LVR is 92% rather than the 80% the bank would want. Effectively, the bank would not be comfortable with lending that much money against a GST exclusive property. And so there's about 105 grand worth of fraudulent money in there. So the reason we think this is unethical is that some people are effectively saying, go to your bank and commit fraud so that we can sell a property. And we think that's totally unethical. Another one that is still around GST, but I want to bring it up, is some developers are trying to sell their properties GST exclusive and advertise it that way because it makes the property look cheaper. It makes it appear cheaper. So with those examples I just said, $800,000 property, if you buy it GST exclusive, you're only paying, in inverted commas for you guys listening on Spotify and Apple, you're only paying 695 grand. So it seems like, wow, I'm getting this property that's worth 800 grand. I'm only paying 695 grand. That is a great deal. But there is some things that make it not so much of a great deal.
Well, over your 15 years of owning that property, you're going to be paying GST on your money that you receive. That's number one. But number two is you're going to pay GST when you sell the property. So when you purchase a property in a GST registered entity from someone else who's registered for GST, i.e. a developer, that's what's called a 0 rated transaction. So no GST changes hands. When you sell the property to a normal person, a mum and dad investor, someone to buying their first home, someone buying their second home, whatever, just a normal person, then GST is triggered, and you've got to pay the GST on the sale price.
Now, the issue with this is it's effectively a stealth capital gains tax. So let's say you bought that property for $800,000. We're going to call it GST inclusive. And over 15 years, it doubles in value to $1.6 million. Now, when you sell that property, you might say, well, great. Okay, I'm going to sell it for 1.6. I'm going to make a gain on paper of $800,000, but then you have to go and pay about $209,000 of that money back to the IRD. You've got to pay the GST on that. Now, some of that is just paying back the GST you claimed in the past. But effectively, you might say, cool, I'm going to invest in an $800,000 property. It's going to double in value. I'm going to make $800,000. Well, actually, if you are doing this kind of GST dance, you've got a 13% stealth capital gains tax. So rather than getting 800 grand, you're actually only getting 700 grand, which of course is a lot of money, but it's pretty painful to pay $100,000 of that to the IRD. And so some people, some unethical people, are advertising their properties as GST exclusive, which in itself is not very unethical. But if you don't disclose the fact that actually you've got a stealth capital gains tax in there and you're selling these properties as an investment and not telling a customer everything they need to know, that's pretty unethical and a bit of a dodgy sales tactic as well.
Yeah, and I think the biggest problem with this is if you don't know about it and you go into this kind of investment blind, what is going to happen in 15 years' time is all of a sudden you're going to pay this huge amount of GST that you kind of weren't expecting, and it's kind of too late at that stage. If that property investment firm goes in the next 15 years, which if they're doing things like this is highly probable, well, there's going to be no one to complain to about it.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about GST. Let's come to some of the other dodgy sales tactics we see. Number 3, I know really gets up your goat, and sometimes real estate agents do it.
Yeah. So this is underquoting, and there's a real estate term. I mean, they've always got these sayings, don't they? Quote it low, watch it go. Quote it high, watch it die.
Now, what do you mean by quoting?
Okay, so what they do is, let's say a property is going to go to auction, and the vendor wants and is not going to accept anything less than $1 million. Well, when you're going through the open home and saying, okay, well, what kind of money is this going to buy? The agent might say something like, well, it would be a bargain at $800,000. Yeah, it would be a bargain at $800,000, but no one's going to be able to buy it at $800,000. So therefore, don't say $800,000, but they do this to kind of drum up enthusiasm and create a bit of a bidding war.
The other difficult things, especially with auctions, of course, is that before you bid, you've got to be in the position where you can make an unconditional offer, an unconditional bid, which means you've got to go to your lawyer, check out the limb, you've got to get your property inspection done if you want one of those. So you could be spending real money thinking that you're going to be able to buy this property for $800,000, but you're never going to do it. But because we've got some of these unethical sales tactics going on, it leads people to make purchasing decisions or spending money, these people are spending money that they wouldn't otherwise do.
Yeah, and I've also had, I had an instance where an agent in Christchurch, I'd rung up because it said buyer inquiry over or offers over 595, say. And so I rang up and offered $600,000, and he said, no, the vendors aren't going to accept that. I was like, what do you mean the vendors aren't going to accept that? That's what you've asked for. But they've intentionally, and I've seen this guy's infamous for doing it, advertising properties at such a low rate to drum up that inquiry and then work people up from there.
Yeah, so he's quoting low, hoping that he's going to watch it go. And it's quite interesting. And dodgy sales tactic number 4 really gets up my goat, which is you turn up to an open home and maybe this property's just been listed on the market. You say to the real estate agent, okay, so what sort of price is the seller looking for? And they might say something along the lines of, well, we're just seeing what the market feedback is right now. We're just trying to see where people see the market or see the value of this property. And do you know why that really gets up my goat?
Because they're the expert. They should have figured that out.
The real estate agent should have figured it out. But you know that when they went to that listing appointment, when that real estate agent walked in to tell the seller, to try and get the listing from the seller, what's the first question the seller's going to ask?
How much can I sell my house for?
And the real estate agent would have given them a value or given them a price. Hey, I see it around this. We should go in and try and get, let's call it $1 million or whatever it happens to be. So the real estate agent knows, but they don't want to tell you.
Yeah.
And I think that's incredibly dodgy. That's like, oh, well, you tell me what you think it's worth. No, I'm asking you because you're supposed to be the expert and that's your job. And so I always think, well, if you're going to do that, I'm going to lowball the hell out of you. I'm really going to ruin your day. I'm going to look at the homes.co.nz valuation and lock 20% off it. And dodgy sales tactic number 5 is actually what real estate agents sometimes do, or bad real estate agents do to sellers of the property. So a real estate agent's incentive is always to sell the property. Now, it doesn't always matter what price they sell it at. They want to get the property sold. Because do you ever remember reading in Freakonomics that...
yeah.
Do you know the story?
Yep. So the story goes a lot. The hypothesis was that real estate agents were more interested in getting the sale quickly than getting the best value for money for their client. And the way they tested this is they looked at real estate agents who sold their own houses, how many days longer they kept their property on the market and how much higher they got over the RV type of thing.
Because let's say that a real estate agent's commission is 3%, right? If they sell a property for an extra $10,000, they're going to get an extra $300.
Yeah, what do you do?
Which is not necessarily that much. Now, it's a big deal if you're the seller because that means you're getting an extra $9,700. So your incentive is to hold out for that extra 10K. The real estate agent's incentive is sometimes just to get it sold. Now, the best thing a real estate agent can do to try and get a vendor to accept a lower price is to get the seller to spend a lot of money on the property. Now, that could be doing little renovations here or there, spending a lot of money on marketing, whether it be print or online, upgrading the Trade Me listing, which is usually a good idea, let's be honest, but paying a lot for marketing and renovations, because if the seller has then spent 20 grand or 25 grand doing some renovations, on some marketing, on some extra signage, on some of all of these extras, extra, then the seller is highly motivated to say, well, I've already spent 25 grand. I really need to sell this property now because I want to get a return on that 25 grand I spent. Now, let's be clear, because there are a lot of real estate agents listening to the show. Just because your real estate agent is saying, hey, maybe we should spend some more money on marketing, that is not automatically dodgy. But if they were doing it with the intent to make you spend more money so you become more motivated as a seller, then that would be dodgy. Now, it's pretty hard to figure out what their intent is or where is the line on this, but it's important to put it out there and say this sometimes happens because the real estate agent wants to make the seller more motivated to accept that lower price. Do you ever see that in practice, Andrew?
That one's a really hard. I can absolutely see how that could be used as a tactic. I don't know how you'd ever be able to distinguish between if someone was using that tactic against you or not. So I think that's where you'd just go straight to, is this person got a good reputation?
Yeah, it's got to come down to a bit more of a feeling.
Yeah.
And one other one that I want to get your opinion on is real estate agents' use of fake scarcity. So it's been on the market for a while, and then what do?
So I must be the unluckiest timed person when it comes to buying things, because every time I've gone to a real estate agent to buy something that's sat on the market for a while, I'll get the phone call. Oh, now there's someone else that's potentially looking at this now. It might go into a multi-offer situation every single time. Like, I don't know. Maybe it's completely genuine. Maybe it's just unlucky timing. Or maybe they're just trying to create a bit of scarcity.
So maybe they're pretending that there's some other buyer.
Yeah.
To be honest, I can imagine as well that maybe there is someone who has inquired about the property.
And then they ring up.
And then they say, oh, look, Andrew, there's someone else who's interested in the property. Now, they might have only just sent a bloody email or had a quick phone, chat on the phone. Doesn't necessarily mean they're going to put it an offer and even a competitive offer. So these are just 6 of the main things to look out for. So 5 and a bonus one, things to look out for when you are buying and also selling property, so you can try and avoid some of those unethical and dodgy sales tactics that we know sometimes happen in New Zealand in the real estate market. But one thing I do want to say is, of course, not every real estate agent is dodgy out there. There are a lot of good ones. You've just got to be aware of the bad ones. Right, let's wrap it up there, but please don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. It really does help us get the message out to more people. If you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple Podcasts and you want to see our faces, some of the spreadsheets we're sharing, just Google Opus Partners YouTube. It'll be the first thing that comes up. And if you are watching on YouTube, make sure you hit the subscribe button. We release new videos on here every Monday and Wednesday. Thanks Thanks for listening to the Property Academy podcast. I'm your host, Tim Knight.
I'm Andrew Nicol.
We're going to be back again tomorrow with even more daily strategies, tactics, and insights to help you get the most out of the New Zealand property market. Until next time,